Growing up in the Chicagoland area, we knew pretty much in the month of March, two things were going to happen. One, it was still going to be ridiculously cold from the winter, and two, everyone is going to act like an Irishman on St. Patrick's Day. Maybe not the way an actual Irishman would recognize, but it's the Chicago spin on things. You drink beer that's green, you wear clothes that are green, you see people in parades wearing green, playing bagpipes, and you celebrate a river that's dyed green. You walk around shouting, "Top of the morning," and "Where's me Lucky Charms?" in a really bad accent. And odds are pretty good at the end of the day, you go home for a dinner of corned beef and cabbage. Now the corned beef we get is usually sold in a bag at the grocery store, and it's sitting in some sort of a gelatinous goo that is a brine, and it's been sitting in that bag for who knows how long, but really far too long. When you cook it, it's pretty much just salty food. It's kind of mushy because the salt's been dissolving that meat for a very long time, and the little seasoning packet that's in there just doesn't do justice. And there's one thing we can do to change all that, and that's to make our own corned beef. So in today's exciting episode, we're doing just that. Corned beef from scratch. Welcome back to Master of None. Now I should point out this is not my own personal recipe. This is from Alton Brown. He pretty much knows a thing or two about cooking food. And I've made it a couple of times. It's really delicious and it's really simple. The real challenge though is that it takes 10 days. That's right, 10 days. This is a piece of meat that's going to sit in a brine for a week and a half so that all the delicious flavor is infused before you start cooking it. So it's an easy recipe, it just takes a long time. But most of that time is hands off, so it's really simple. So if you want to cook this for St. Patrick's Day, take a look at your calendar and do some simple math. March 17th is St. Patrick's Day. You need to start prepping this on March 7th. And to make sure you're prepared, start shopping on the 4th or the 5th to make sure you've got all the ingredients, because a couple of them might be a little difficult to find. Now, in my opinion, one of the most important things for this recipe is saltpeter, and it might be the most difficult thing for you to find, so you need a couple of days to start tracking it down. Saltpeter is this pink stuff, but don't confuse it with Himalayan pink salt. It's not that. It's also not pickling salt. Don't confuse with that. It's not rock salt, it's not sea salt, it's not kosher salt, it's not iodized salt. Now it goes by a couple of different names. Saltpeter, curing salt, Prague powder #1, but for chemists it's known as potassium nitrate. And it can be deadly if you eat way too much. I don't know exactly how deadly it is, but just don't get it confused with regular salt. So to get things going, we're going to get this and some salt and some brown sugar into a pot of water and get that simmered and dissolved. Then we're going to add some aromatics. Kosher salt. Oh, this is going to take forever. Not going to make you watch the whole thing, but we're going for 9.5 ounces here. All right, to get this brine started, we're going to start with 1 cup of water. In goes the kosher salt, a 1/2 cup of brown sugar, I like the dark stuff, and 4 teaspoons of the Prague powder. Let's bring that up to a nice simmer. Okay, for our herbs and spices, we go with 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, 3 decent bay leaves, juniper berries, lucky 13. 8 allspice berries, 1 teaspoon of black peppercorn, 1 teaspoon mustard seed, and 1 cinnamon stick, broken up. Once you've measured everything out, odds are pretty good. Your brine's already come to a boil and everything's dissolved, so add the herbs, and you can turn off the heat. Give everything a nice stir like it was a tea that needs to seep for a couple of minutes. Once it's rested, we'll get some ice in there. This is 3 pounds of ice, which is a little over 10 cups. Obviously, the shape of an ice cube is going to differentiate, so don't go by volume, go by weight. The idea here is to add the ice and chill it down so that there's no heat in the brine to affect the meat when you drop it in. Okay, so now this is a 10-pound brisket, nice and big. The butcher did a decent job removing some of the fat. I still want to take off some of the stuff that is just sort of a little too thick in my opinion, but we don't have to do too much. Famous last words. Now this is a whole brisket, which means it's actually made up of two muscles. One is the flat underneath, and on top is the point. The point is typically more fatty. You can see the fat all in between here, and this is lean. So if you go to a barbecue place, you say fatty and lean, that's what they're talking about. Lean is the flat, and the point is fatty or moist. They use moist a lot because they don't want to say fat, because you're eating a lot of fat. But I digress. Because this is two pieces of meat, I actually want to cut these apart and remove a lot of this fat so that the meat itself can absorb a lot of that brine and the delicious herbs and spices that we're putting into it. Now, a lot of you may think, hey, you don't need to cut all that fat off because it's going to render during the cooking process, but I really don't want to deal with all that fat at any point in time when I want to be eating it. All right, so that's our point. That came in at 2.6 pounds. And the flat here, this came in at 6.2 pounds. So if you're doing the math at home, this is 8.8 pounds of meat, and we lost just under 2 pounds from the trimming process. All right, so our brine has cooled down, so now it's time to bring it over. I've got this gigantic bag that I'm going to put the brine in. This is going to help me hold it. The idea here is that the meat is totally submerged in the brine, so we want to squeeze all the air out of this bag as much as possible. All right, now for the big rest. So this is going to sit in the fridge for 10 days. Every day we're going to come back, we're going to give it a little shake to make sure the herbs and spices are all mixed up and permeating the meat as they should. So we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see you in 10 days. All right, today is the big day, and it is time to cook the meat. I'm actually going to do it in two different ways. The first one, the point, I'm going to roast in the oven. And the first thing we have to do is rinse that brine off of the meat. So we've got the point sitting on a trivet. We're going to add some water just before it reaches the trivet itself. That's plenty. Cover this in foil and get it in a 350-degree oven. After 2 hours, we're taking the lid off, putting it back in for 1 hour. Oh, it smells so good. All right, we're just checking the temperature, and we want it over 205, and we have achieved, yep, we've got it. Time to let it rest. Hey, so I just want to jump in here real quick and point out something that's not so obvious. The brisket sat in a tub for 10 days absorbing that brine, and in the normal cooking process, a lot of that brine is then removed because it's in a big pot of water for a couple of hours. In fact, if you taste that water when you're done cooking, it's going to be way too salty for using as a soup stock. Anyway, when I cook this point in the oven, it doesn't have the chance to release the salt as it usually would. So it's going to be a little overpowering. This is okay when using it for sandwiches or corned beef hash because all the other ingredients will balance out that saltiness. So don't use this method of cooking for a traditional dinner. Okay, back to the show. I should point out here that the intermuscular fat of the point is acting like a rubber band, so I'm having a hard time cutting it. And it doesn't help that my knife really needs a good sharpening. If you know anything about brisket, that's a good hang. And pulling it apart should come apart nice and easy. The flavor, so good. Time to slice this up before I eat it all. And the reason I'm slicing it? To make Reubens. Our press is nice and toasty warm, so we start with rye, buttered side down. It's sizzling, that's a nice sound. You then go in with 2 slices of Swiss. Nice couple of chunks of the meat. I should point out here, because we roasted this cut, we have a better texture, and a thick slice makes it stand out. Yeah, one more never hurt. Getting our sauce. Oh, wait a minute. Let's back up a sec. We need to make Russian dressing. And once you make it, you'll never buy another bottle of it. Mayonnaise, sour cream, ketchup, dill pickle relish, lemon juice, horseradish. Mix it, let it sit in the fridge overnight. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, back to making the sandwich. And our sauerkraut. You may actually notice I have it sitting on a paper towel. That's to absorb any of the liquid from the sauerkraut and get rid of it before we throw it in the sandwich. Come in with the lid and we close it up. We'll let this go for a couple of minutes. All right, that should be enough. So, oh, she's looking good. All right, we are going to let that rest as if it were a steak. I should point out, this sandwich looks small, but you will be quite full once you finish it. So, we have a Reuben sandwich fit for a king. This thing is crammed full of flavor and I can't wait to dig into it. But, before I start stuffing my face, let's talk about what we're going to do with the other part of that brisket. And it's going to come down to a more traditional way of cooking it by sticking it in a pot and simmering it for hours and hours so it gets nice and moist and tender. We're going to serve it with some carrots and some cabbage and some potatoes, and it's going to be a fantastic dinner. All right, so we're going to get this in a pot of water. We're going to fill it to make sure that the water covers the meat. And we'll keep an eye on that and make sure it doesn't evaporate off. We're also going to add 1 coarsely chopped onion, a stalk of celery, leaves are fine, and 2 carrots, because I like carrots. Now we'll put a lid on this and let it simmer for 2 to 3 hours. Start checking 2.5 hours in. You don't want to overcook it or else it's just going to fall apart in the pot. But you want to make sure that all that connective tissue is broken apart so that when it comes out and you start slicing it, it's not chewy and tough. All right, one of the sides will be carrots and potatoes. We're going to roast them together. So we're just going to add a little olive oil in here. Get them coated up pretty good. A little salt. Toss them. And these are going to go in a 400-degree oven for half an hour. Okay, it's time to check the brisket, and We're not going to be using the probe thermometer to check the temperature. What we want to do is use it to check the tenderness of the meat. And I can already tell that we're going through nice and easy. When I'm smoking a brisket, I like it to be 205. This is definitely over 205. And it's very tender, so I think it's ready to come out. We've pulled her out. She's looking great, but she needs to rest, so cover with tin foil. So the other side we're going to make is, of course, the traditional cabbage. And I'm going to make 6 wedges out of this. To make it a little easier on me, I'm going to cut it in half, but not all the way. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to make another not all the way cut. And my last one. Now I can cut this all the way in half. And this just makes it easier to make your slices. All right, what I have here is 2 cups of water and a pinch of salt. It's boiling. We're putting in our cabbage wedges, gently, of course. We don't want splashing. These are going to be in for about 5 minutes. We're going to come back. We're going to flip them. Okay, the cabbage has been cooking 4 minutes on each side. We're going to get rid of this excess water real quick. We're going to put it back on the heat. Let it steam off. Turn that temp down to low. Now that the excess water has been steamed off, we're going to kill the heat. We're going to put some butter on this. And just like that, we're done with the cabbage. And the carrots and potatoes are done. Looking real good. So now it's time to plate up. All right, there you go. I have been sampling this all throughout the day just to make sure everything's tasting good and on the right track, and it's fantastic. I can't be happier with the way the meat turned out. This is the first time I cooked the cabbage this way. It's fantastic. It's much better than just throwing it in the pot and letting it simmer with the meat for God knows how long. It's got its own flavors to it, which is important when you have so many things on a plate. I hope you enjoyed watching me cook this as much as I'm going to enjoy eating this. And if you're curious, go check out the other videos on my channel. I do more than just cooking, so I'd appreciate you poking around, see what I got, see if you like it. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Otherwise, it's time to eat. Thanks everyone. I'll see you later.